We would like to thank LSR for sponsoring the Let's Be Frank video podcast. LSR produces Southern Cane pure cane sugar, which is only grown, refined, and packaged in Louisiana. Southern Cane is available in your local Associated Grocers and Rouse's supermarkets.
We are kicking off episode number 8 on the Let's Be Frank video podcast. I'm your host, Jason Duhe. Alongside me is Hall of Fame head coach Frank Monica. We have a jam-packed show for you tonight. We're going to talk LHSAA football, some Week 7 recaps, Week 8 previews. We're going to talk LSU, Tulane, Saints football. We're going to have special guest Gordy Rush. We're also going to be talking in our Let's Be Frank segment about faking injuries. So, Coach, another big weekend for high school and college football, nearing the end of the season for the high school game. And again, this is the point in the season where you really want to make sure you're sharp. But there's some teams who are kind of vying for those spots to kind of get settled in those power ratings and finish off strong so they can make sure that they even make it in the top teams with this new changed format for the playoffs.
I think what you're going to see, Jason, going to get in Week 8, you're going to see some of the teams get a lot better or teams get a lot worse. Some of them, because of the injury bug, might fall by the wayside, but because of injuries, you're going to see some of those guys that got early injuries, all of a sudden they'll start to come back at the end of the year. And then all of a sudden you probably know what you've done in that situation. You've created depth because someone else filled in that spot. So you've created some depth and head into the playoffs. So, but right now everybody's starting to watch the power ranking system, and the top 24 is going to get in on the select side. The other side will have a full bracket, but this should be a lot of fun for the next 3 weeks.
A prime example of that, Coach, a team you're familiar with, the Roma Raiders, really were hit with the injury bug the entire season last year and made a deep run in the playoffs. So people definitely need to keep an eye out on some of those teams, maybe those brand name schools, as you will, that maybe have struggled in certain weeks, but really might have an opportunity here to make a splash as we do come up in the playoffs.
You know what happens, Jason? You can have a team with a bad record also, but a good football team, and there are a couple of them come to mind. We'll talk about them later. And when they get in, they could be dangerous when they get in because they will get a pretty good draw, and they're going to beat a real good football team. And a good football team at the top of the bracket, all of a sudden they're playing a lower seed because of their schedule, because of the lack of wins, and all of a sudden they'll get sort of ambushed by that team. So a couple that we'll talk about as the show goes on.
Coach, off the top of the cuff here, I didn't prep you for this one. What's the toughest draw you've had as a higher seed whenever you look at your career in coaching? Well, the toughest first round draw.
I think one of them was we played a team out of Cecilia one year, and that was the first time in the playoffs in a long time. And they came in, they played a tough schedule. They had some early losses, and they also had some losses of personnel. And then all of a sudden, by the time we faced them, in fact, we missed a field goal at the end of the game, but they beat us, and that was a good football team we had that year. And we weren't able to advance because we met them in the very first round.
Coach, didn't you add 6 feet to the goalpost after that day?
The 10 feet. I had 10 feet because I had a official who had one eye, and he could see that upright on the left side. So you know how that goes. But it was one of those things that even today, that even the players thought that we had made it. But you know that's why within 2 weeks I had an extension put on that goalpost, and it's still there today.
Let's go ahead and take a look at some Week 7 recaps where we're going to lead off here. Curtis defeated Brother Martin 17-14. Brother Martin's kind of had a bit of a rough stretch, and you can find yourself very easy in that hole in the Catholic League, but the punches don't stop here. It's going to continue to build with this brutal district.
There's so many games that end with one score. With one score, and this was one. John Curtis trailed at halftime, and they had to kick a field goal with 2 minutes and 35 seconds left to go in the game to win it, to put Brother Martin away. Brother Martin's a very good football team, team headed for the playoff, but John Curtis is getting better each week. Remember, a couple of their losses have been very close losses. They're the only team last year to actually beat Carr. And so they have this type of offense that can shrink the game and very physical defense. So we've got a lot of football left to play, especially in the Catholic League.
In our next matchup, we had Legacy School out of Texas defeating St. Charles Catholic in quadruple overtime, 34-28. Coach, in the game where I was talking to people who had left the game a few minutes early, and I said, that game went into quadruple overtime? And they said, no way. We left with 3 minutes. But if you left with 3 minutes, you missed all the scoring, as the Comets put up 2 touchdowns with under 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And draw that game out against a very good ball club, but just couldn't come away with a win.
Yeah, they're a very talented team. 4 kids that committed to play D1. The quarterback was exceptional, real good runner and a thrower. And when he needed, the game was on the line, he kind of took the game over himself. St. Charles was resilient. They fought back, got into the has the chance to win it in overtime. Unfortunately, they threw an interception at the end, but quarterback had actually played well the entire ball game, and it was kind of just little. It wasn't a misread. The ball was there. It's just that the receiver didn't get his hit around, and then they scored. So, but this legacy team, I think, is a very good football team. Everyone on the team is really talented, but don't count the Comets out yet, because the Comets is one of those teams I was talking about. Somebody is going to get a real bad draw when they draw these brackets up and they see the Comets, and all of a sudden that's who you get in the first round. They're going to be very surprised, because they're one of those teams that we talked about. That because remember, all their losses have been by one score, so they're just right there knocking on the door with a real tough schedule. So Coach Stein will have them going, and so they just have to rebound this week and get their act together and get their swagger back.
In our next matchup, we had Rummel defeating St. Aug 26-20. And Rummel's a team I mentioned earlier, had to use a lot of younger players just a year ago, made that deep run, and have really done an exceptional job this year building upon that momentum, beating a really quality St. Aug ball club that plays a really strong defense.
No question that the defense was really stout in this ball game. Coach Monica said that, the explosive, St. Aug scored on two long pass plays against them. But they came in and they held when they got the game in overtime. St. Aug scored at the end to tie it. They got a blocked PAT with 2 minutes or something to go in the ball game, so that sent the ball game into overtime. And then there was a kid that cramped up for Rummel, and during the overtime period on third down, so he inserted a sophomore that had not been in the game. In the first play, he intercepted the pass. And then after that, Rummel scored on their very, very first play of overtime to win the game. But all those games, typical Catholic League game, and you got to be there in the fourth quarter. And if you stick with people in the fourth quarter, you might have a chance to win it, and they did.
Side note, we talked about two back-to-back games that went into overtime. What are your thoughts on LHSAA rules that start this overtime from the 10-yard line? Why not the 25 or the 20? Why do you like the rules where it starts at the 10?
I like the rule because if you start at the 25, the high schools are not that proficient, with the kicking game, and they have the 2-point rule that you have to go for two after the second overtime. So I think that's what they're trying to do, is trying to shorten that so games don't go to 5 or 6 overtime. But you almost had one the other night in terms of that. But that's a good rule. I think it's a fair rule. Both people play offense. Both people play defense. Because of that rule, Jason, and you and I talked about this before, maybe it negates the thought about going for two on one play. Because this way, I always felt now before that, well, one play, let's go for two. But this rule actually allows the defense to play and the offense. So all 22 are part of the win or the loss. And I kind of like that.
In our next game, we had Carr, who defeated Jesuit 21-9 in their matchup. Jesuit really hung tight with this Carr ball club. I think that goes back to playing ball control football and solid defense, but probably one of the tougher matchups that Carr has had. And it's tough to see somebody being able to outlast Carr for 48 minutes.
I think, on paper, Jesuit's defensive and offensive line can stand with anybody in the Catholic League, probably anybody in the state. And they're going to keep them close in both ball games. You're not going to push their defensive line around. Whenever they play, it's going to be a low-scoring game. I mean, you can hold Carr to 21 points. You certainly can do that to anybody in the state. And they'll be there. They'll line up right. They're going to play extremely hard. Coach Manali's a hard-nosed coach, and I think Coach Price is also. And they, after the ball game, both of them were throwing kudos to one another about how well coached both teams were. So and Carl said, man, I really respect these guys, and I'm actually afraid to play these guys because they're so well coached and they're physical. So that might be one of the biggest scares that Carl might have, and that left on their schedule.
In our next game, we had Holy Cross defeating Warren Easton 23-21 in a game that I got the opportunity to be at. It was a crazy ball game. Holy Cross went up early. Warren Easton really tried to air the ball out early, but in the second half decided to slow things down, really ran the ball a lot with their quarterback, Carl Reed. kind of got banged up along the way, and I think that changed some of the calls that they had to make late in the game when it got a little bit hairy and tight. But really some explosive plays from Holy Cross's offense by Finn Martin, one in a kickoff return after Warneyson felt like they had the momentum. A big win for this Holy Cross ball club.
Yeah, I think the kickoff return tonight kind of broke their will a little bit, and that's what you're looking for. That's one of the explosive plays that we talk about.
In our next matchup, we had Destrehan taking on Captain Shreve. After Captain Shreve rode another overtime ball game where a high-scoring game in the 70s, they give up 46 this week to Destrehan. And we know Destrehan has all these athletes and a crazy amount of talent across the field. Maybe he had a few bumps and bruises along the way, but they seem to be building as they're getting healthy, as you mentioned, at the tail end of the season.
Well, we'll talk about that later on, but they got their quarterback back, and that's a lot of your offense right there. A guy that's been underneath the center, a guy that's been there, the team kind of lifted up the confidence level of the whole team and the competitive spirit, also the juices flow. And so there's a difference in that huddle when you got a guy that's in command and you know that this guy's going to make a play whenever we need one. So that made it all the difference in the ball game. Captain Shreve been putting up a lot of points in every ball game, and so it's not a big injustice to the Destrehan defense to give up 42. But the most important thing is that they had 46.
In our next matchup, we had Lutcher taking on Edie White, and the Bulldogs came out with the 27-20 victory in a big district matchup. These teams will be separated when it comes down to the playoffs, and both these teams have every opportunity to be in the thick of things when it comes down to the Superdome. But a nice win for the Bulldogs.
Really nice. The game was actually not that close. I think that the Edie White got a turnover, pick. A little scoop and score at the end of the ball game to make the score a little closer, but it looked like Lutcher dominated this ball game. Coach Jenkins, his son, is the quarterback, and he doesn't have to do an awful lot because he's got great skill. He got a good running back and receivers. He just has to manage the game, and he continues to do that behind that great defense. I think this team could go a long way, but Coach Kyle was saying his team is very physical. They do it a different way. They're really good on defense. They can shrink the game on you. They will be one of the contenders in their classification on Division II when the time comes.
Coach Jenkins can hold his own in the running game now. He can be the ball distributor, but I watched him play a few weeks ago, and, man, boy can scoot. He can run. So that's another aspect of that offense people are going to have to keep an eye on as the season progresses. And in again, what I would call one of the biggest rivalries in the state, we had Santa Maud defeating East Ascension 17-12 in that ball game. And again, just one of those rivalries that we love to talk about here.
Yeah, the school gets involved, the community gets involved. Every day at those schools during this week, there's a function that goes on in relation to the game. Some kind of pep rally, some kind of, deals in the hall or whatever. And they have bonfires. They have a lot of activities to celebrate this game. Well, anyway, Santa Maud jumped out to a big lead, and EA fought back and made a ball game of it at the end. So kudos to Coach Oliver, Coach Bethune, and this is a great rivalry, and that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a tight ball game, and I think that the kids really grow from these rivals, and I just love rivals. I think they add so much to your program. The kids play on a different level, and the parents even act different that week. Excuse me. But I think we need more of those. We just don't have enough of those now around the state.
In our next game, we had, speaking of big games, in North Louisiana, Neville defeated Ruston 26-21 in a game that, again, we talk about teams that are going to be in the thick of things when the season is wrapping up. Two really good ball clubs that I think we will be talking about semifinals weekend, most likely in the finals as well.
Well, Neville or Ruston, neither one of them are strangers to the Superdome, especially Neville. They've been there a number of times. Coach McCarty was once the head coach. Now he's the principal of that school, but they haven't missed a beat. They're still a very, very good power up there. Ruston is also. And unfortunately, that district, other than the Catholic League, that might be the toughest district in the state. So, every week there's a good ball game in that district. And that was no different. They went down to the end.
Notre Dame defeated Lafayette Christian 42-28. This was Notre Dame's first victory over Lafayette Christian. But as you mentioned, just a week ago, consistency prevailed in that matchup.
Yeah, Lafayette Christian, one of those teams that talk about a lot like St. Charles, when they get in the playoffs, they're going to be a team that probably won't have a high power ranking, but they'll be dangerous. They will be within the top 3 or 4 in that particular division as far as a possibility to get to the Superdome. So don't count them out. Notre Dame is very methodical. They'll do things right. They'll play extremely hard. They won't make many mistakes. And you're just going to have to outplay them when you play them. They don't have the great speed, but they're a powerful, strong football team. Coach Cook's been there a long time. Coach Cook's, I'm sure he'd like to one day maybe walk off in the sunset, but I think he would rather walk off from the Superdome floor one day with the victory, and then maybe say right off in the sunset because he's got over 300 wins, so he's been in real good shape there. He's been in all the Hall of Fame, so I do think that he's probably at the end of his tenure, but I think he would like to go out a winner.
We're going to go ahead and jump forward and take a look at some matchups that we have this upcoming Friday night, some Week 8 matchups. Leading off, we have Carr, who is unbeaten, taking on a Warren Easton team that just came off of a tight loss against Holy Cross. Carr, I got to watch both these teams play. Carr's ability to adjust and make changes on the fly has been one of the biggest reasons you've seen them in these tight matchups in the first half and jumping out to big margins in the second half. Warren Easton needs a little bit more consistency on offense, and I'm not quite sure they'll find that footing against Carr.
Well, I want everybody to know this. We had this discussion today while we were actually waiting at the wake for Coach Charles Baglio about there are not many real good games. A couple of coaches saying they'd like to go to a different game every Friday. There are not many big matchups outside the Catholic League this week. There are a lot of look like blowout games scheduled because they're in district play now, and a lot of teams are not playing the best team in the district. They're playing someone else that's not real strong. So you're going to see a lot of blowout games this week, and of course with that running time rule after 42 points, I think it's a good idea. But this certainly won't be one of them. Carr and Warren Easton, traditional games have always played one another, even when they weren't in the same district. At one time they were, but so this would be a highly anticipated game. Both teams will show their best, and I don't know if Warren Easton has the firepower to stay in there with Carr, but they'll play hard.
We also have a Jesuit hitting the road and taking on Curtis. Jesuit comes in 4-3, Curtis 4-2. Both these teams have played very fundamental, sound defense, and I think that'll be kind of one of the biggest matchups in this game are these offenses trying to put up points against stingy defenses.
This game could be go to overtime at 0-0 because they both have real good defenses, and I know they'll knock one another around. And it's not exactly a road trip. Jesuit also uses the Shrine, and that's John Curtis. That's their home field. So this would be a game that you could see grass stains, you could see mud in the face masks and stuff like that. I mean, it's going to be right down in the trenches. This could be like trench warfare. This is the kind of game that the old throwback game that you've been looking for. So as the people say, the slobber knocker, whatever it's called, this could be that type of game.
In our next game, we have St. Charles Catholic, who takes on Belle Chase. Belle Chase comes in undefeated. St. Charles looking for their second win on the year. We've discussed this. This could be St. Charles' opportunity to kind of show everybody you have to throw out our record and what we've done in the past. We're looking forward to the playoffs and what we have the opportunity to do. And this is their opportunity against a Belle Chase team that's handled business up to this point.
When you compare the schedules, there's no comparison. St. Charles has played a really good football team. You look at the win percentages of the teams that St. Charles has played compared to Belle Chase's schedule, not taking anything away from them. They're still undefeated. But yet, St. Charles is battle-tested, and it's a must-win situation for them. And so I know it's a home game for Belle Chase. They're probably looking forward to playing St. Charles because of the reputation, but it's a must-win. So I think St. Charles is like a cage nutria. When you get them in the corner, they come out scratching. So this could be a big game for St. Charles Catholic.
We also have Riverside as going to take on Central Catholic. Central Catholic's been a very consistent program. Riverside under Coach Roussel has done a fantastic job. Only a pair of losses on the year with some quality wins along the way. What do you like to see in this game?
Oh, I think, Central Catholic is not the team they used to be, but they're still dangerous. But Riverside's got a lot of firepower, and they're playing good defense now. I look for this to be a one-sided affair. I think you're right. I think Coach Rousseau has done a phenomenal job. He and Coach Lashley on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they're well coached, and they got the players. They got the players to handle that, and got a couple guys going both ways. But they got to really hit it on all cylinders now. A team that could end up in the Superdome again.
We also have Holy Cross, who's going to take on Rummel, and Holy Cross gets back their quarterback Claude Johnson, as we saw a week ago. Their offense flowed a bit better and made some plays, but this Rummel defense has pretty much stopped everybody that's been in their way, and I think that's going to be the biggest matchup, is this Holy Cross offense trying to find a way to move the football against this Rummel defense.
Well, I think they can. Holy Cross has got some skill on the outside. They have a huge tight end. Quarterback can get he's got a lot of choices to go to. Rummel's got to stay away from the explosive play against them. But more importantly, Rummel's offensive side of the ball, they got to get things going and take some of the pressure off that defense. You can't keep getting all those at-bats. The more at-bats that they get, something is going to break after a while. So it's very important that Rummel gets their offense. They get their offense in gear. This could be a real fine season for them. But they still got to get a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball.
In our next matchup, we have St. Aug, who's going to be taking on Brother Martin. And we know Brother Martin has had a few rough weeks, would really like to get their edge back by taking on this Purple Knight Ball Club. But Coach Valdez's team is going to be ready to play. We know they have a ton of athletes on the field, and we'll see if this offense can do enough to knock off this Brother Martin squad.
The St. Aug, I'm sure Coach Valdez will tell you, the last two ball games, they've been right there. Lose an overtime game to Rummel the week before. They lost to Jesuit in a very close ball game at the end. So I'm sure that they're wounded themselves, and you don't like to play a wounded team. But yet on the flip side, Brother Martin has been consistent. I mean, they consistently play the same every week. There's not many highs and lows. Whether they make a big play to stay away from the turnovers, that's a big thing for them. But other than that, they're a solid football team. You play a team in the Catholic League. They're well coached. You just have to you got to get the breaks. Now you don't know when they're going to occur. I think Bear Bryant had the best quote ever. He said, every football game is composed of 3 big momentum plays, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 big momentum plays, but you never know when they're going to occur. So when you try to prepare, you're preparing your team for that big momentum play and the next snap.
And we talked about how teams might see some underrated or underevaluated teams based off the PowerPoints and how they could make a run. We've seen some of these teams maybe come into the playoffs a little bit lower from the Catholic League and make a run. Rummel was the one we discussed consistently from last year. We've seen other teams. Jesuits made
Brother Martin the year before ended up in the Superdome.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to keep in mind that regardless of what teams come out on top this district, a district title is big, but that doesn't mean that team's going to be hoisting the trophy come time in December.
Right. Exactly.
We also have East Ascension, who's going to take on Turlings Catholic. Turlings Catholic has been a very consistent program, undefeated coming into this matchup. East Ascension going to come off that emotional roller coaster in that game against Santa Ma, and I think it'll be a tough one for them to go out and win because of how good Turlings Catholic is consistently.
For what I understand, the people out west are really raving about this particular football team. They think they got a shot, but remember now they're playing in the highest division, so they're not in Division II anymore, and they decided to play up, which is a good move on their part. But I don't know if EA can stand with them, but it certainly be a good barometer about how far Coach Mathern's program has come.
Absolutely. Our next game, we have Vermilion Catholic, who's going to hit the road and take on Opelousas Catholic. Vermilion Catholic, undefeated, a team that we've both said will very likely be in if not in the Superdome, at least in the semifinals. What do you like about this team and this matchup?
Well, a powerful football team. They run a lot of quarterback runs, a lot of wildcat stuff, and they can beat you a couple of different ways. Play real good defense, got good players, very physical. Opelousas Catholic could be a team that can be disruptive. I don't know if they have the firepower to stay with Vermilion Catholic. Vermilion Catholic look like they're destined to be one of those teams that will actually punch their ticket to the Superdome this early.
We have Alexandria, who's going to take on Ruston. Alexandria undefeated on the year. Ruston receiving their first loss just a week ago. Alexandria has played some quality ball clubs, beat a Destrehan ball club earlier this season. Ruston is also very battle-tested. I think it'll be a big physical matchup between these two football teams.
No question about that. Again, it's that district up there. That district up there is really, really a quality district. A lot of good football teams, and they're on a public school side, the non-select side. So there could be rematches all over this particular district. And Alexander can put on a lot of points because Bachman's always done that. That's his reputation as an offensive guy. And, and Russian has certainly scored a lot of points also. So this could be one of those basketball scores and the tennis matches, so to speak. And it could last forever because they both like to put the ball in the air.
In our last matchup, we have on Acadiana taking on Southside. Both teams come into this game with one loss apiece. Southside, a newer school. I'm not going to say new because it's been around for a bit. If you're not aware of them, they've pulled off this win before. They've been very consistent, knocking off some high-quality opponents. But Acadiana, with their style of offense, with their play, has been the same for years and years and years, very similar to Curtis in that regard. And I think this is going to be an interesting matchup between the new guard versus the old.
Yeah, Coach Curtis took this job with the premise knowing that, hey, I got some dudes here. He just didn't take a job. He's got, this is a good program. It's been established, got some good players at Southside, but yet, Acadiana's that what they do with the Veer is pretty special, a lot like John Curtis. And it's the defense that you don't see often, offense rather, you don't see often. And it's hard to prepare for it with a triple option attack. Now, if you got a guy that can throw it a little bit, it even makes it tougher to defend because it negates the different type of coverages that you have. So it forces you to play a sound defense and maybe just one or two fronts and simple coverages. And you better learn to hold the line of scrimmage. And because if they can run the hard dive on you, it's a long night. So, and this is kind of a rivalry. It's already developed a pretty good rivalry, because of the new school. But I think Southside would like to say, hey, it's a new kid on the block here. But I think Acadiana has something to say about that.
All right, Coach, that'll do it for our high school talk, and we'll go ahead and move on to some local college football. This past Saturday, LSU defeated Arkansas 34-10 in a game that many assumed would be a tighter matchup than it was. LSU handled business, came out, scored early in the game. A ton of penalties. Didn't look great in that regard of the game, but handled business, played excellent defense. The defense put behind Weeks is making a ton of plays all over the field. In particular, that interception that basically forced the LSU offense to punch one in despite their inability to do so for large portions of the game. But a sound win against an Arkansas team, which I think has been decided by 3 points or less 3 of the last 4 years before this season. That's a tough place to go play.
Well, the biggest thing is LSU better or did Arkansas take a night off? It looked to me that a little bit of both. I think LSU is better. There's no question about that. But it looked like for some reason they had an open week. And, boy, they came out flat. And I've always said about open weeks, you lose your intensity, you lose your momentum. So it happened to Tulane against Rice. It happened to Arkansas. So I really don't know. I think you will know a little bit more about the real LSU team this week. I think you'll find out a little bit more, even though that the game didn't look real competitive from the Arkansas standpoint. But I thought LSU did do some good things on defense. Nussmeier makes the plays when he has to. And I think, he scrambles well. The little running back does. Their running game still, even though he had a couple of nice runs, he got stuffed most of the night on the run game. So, again, I'll go back to say that I still think the jury's out about how good LSU is. And I think that Arkansas is actually a better team than what they showed.
Yeah, Coach, we'll touch on Texas A&M, but to your point, I think LSU could win every game left on their schedule, and they could just as easily lose every game left on their schedule. It's really hard to tell. There's been some improvement on the defense, but their offense has kind of been up and down. Again, we saw moments and flashes this past week, but a lot of opportunities where they had to settle for 3. So I think that you're right. The jury is still out on what they will be. We're going to talk to Gordy Rush in just a bit. But what are your thoughts on this LSU A&M matchup?
Well, I really think that A&M – now, A&M is not a juggernaut either. And I think one of the big things that I'm seeing in college football now is the parity. I don't know if there's one out there that you're afraid to play. I mean, the Alabama's the world. I go back and I said from the very beginning, I think Georgia, Clemson, will be two of the better. The first game of the year, I think, will be two of the better teams in the country when the dust settles. So I don't know if anybody's dominant out there right now. Alabama certainly shown that they have Achilles heel, and Ole Miss has. So right now, I think the team that starts to play better, if they get hot, looks like LSU's getting better. I don't think that Texas A&M is a great offensive team. I do know that they're pretty good on defense. The crowd will keep them going because that's a big stadium. They're very loud and traditional with the band and whole deal. So it's a hard place to win at the Kyle Field. If you ever been there, I mean, it's very, very active, participating and the whole thing. The fans get involved in it, and they had great tradition there at Texas A&M. So they will be ready. So you're going to see their best effort, and I just hope that LSU gives them all they can. And I don't care if it's a 1-point win. If they can just get out of there with a W, I think that bodes well for the rest of the season.
To your point about more parity, the college game has become a lot closer to the NFL game in the sense that you can't overlook a win. A win is a win regardless how you get it or how you come by it. And as you look at the Tulane game where they defeated Rice 24-10, you'd mentioned just a moment ago, maybe a little bit flat off of a bye week.
They definitely were flat. I mean, they had turnovers, uncharacteristic of them. And I mean, because they really do a great job. In fact, that turnover margin is something like plus 12 already. That's pretty phenomenal. And that keeps you in ball game. They had to have a pick six again to actually get a little comfort there because the offense was not hitting on all cylinders. You know what? All week, because as a football coach, you don't win ball games on Saturday. You win those ball games in practice. You can tell on the Tuesday in college, your big day is Tuesday. That's your first real hard practice day, Tuesday and Wednesday. You can tell on Tuesday whether your team's going to be into it or not. And if you got a little intensity on Tuesday, you're in pretty good shape. But if you're flat on Tuesday, sometimes you don't get that back. Coach Summerall said in the paper publicly, he said, we had a bad practice on Tuesday. We were not focused. We were not ready. And sometimes, you can read the press clippings a little bit, or you just give them a couple of days off and they get very, very complacent. It happens to a lot of athletes, and they're looking at maybe the record of the opponent. Boy, that's one of the things that you can't do. You can't start reading the jersey. You got to play hard every week, and that's hard to do on the college level, pro level, even high school level.
They take on North Texas this upcoming week. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
North Texas can really score, and that's a scary matchup from the standpoint of you're going there, you're going to Denton, Texas, you're playing over there, but it's a big game for Tulane. If they want to be mentioned to one of these top spots, or maybe the possibility of outside shot of being one of those teams in the 12, they're going to have to run the table from here on out. But this is one of the big, I think, the big games on their schedule that's left. So this is a big hurdle for them. So if they get their swagger back, I still think they're a good football team, though.
To your point, you mentioned that they could still possibly be vying for a spot. I think a lot's been overlooked about two lost teams. A lot of people have been saying, well, this team's eliminated because they already have two losses. Coach, you just talked about it. The parity level in college football right now. I really wouldn't be shocked if there's quite a few two-loss teams, and possibly even we're sitting here arguing about schedules and the three-loss team maybe slipping in.
I think that you see half of them would have two losses. Of the 12, I think you can see at least 6 of them have a couple of losses. And there'll be a couple of people sneaking there from the outside. I mean, you got to – and I think you look at the Army and Navy. Army and Navy, you got to love them. I mean, they'll be the nation's team. They'll be the team that everybody will be pulling for, because they do it the right way. They do it with guys that just go to the military with a military commitment, and they don't. They do it with without NIL money. So I mean, you got to really appreciate what they've done so far, and so I'm not saying they're both going to make it in there, but I think if any of them, I think Navy has a shot.
Coach, Navy plays Notre Dame this weekend. The noise is going to get real loud if they somehow pull off that win.
No question. And then they can knock Notre Dame completely out, put it that way. And it will give them a second loss. And remember, they played at home. That's a different animal. They got to they had a pretty good tradition there. Whenever they score, they get to kiss their girlfriend. So I mean, if I'm sure the football players, they're going to be jacked up with some of the other guys in the bleachers. Hey, you better score. I got to get a chance to kiss this chick. So what a motivation, huh?
Coach, one concern about this playoff system is the teams are being announced the week before Army Navy. So do you think that after this season, they might have to have a discussion about the way this is done and the way this operates? Maybe we have to move this game up a week. I know it'd be tough because of tradition, but it would be heart-wrenching for these teams to be playing the week after the playoffs announced and this to impact their ability to get into the playoffs.
I remember when Bobby Ross was coaching, and he was coaching in one of the military academies. He went to Congress and asked them for permission to, for their football team, for their players to go to the NFL, go to the next level. And he was finally granted that because, you had in basketball, you had David Robinson that went from Navy. He went to play in NBA basketball. And so they wouldn't have to go through the military commitment, which is 6 years. So you got to really respect these guys for what they do. They're hard-nosed. They're not as big. Now, one time they had, I don't know if people knew this, they had restrictions. Like, for instance, if you were in the Navy, you couldn't be taller than 6'2" because you couldn't fit in the submarine. Or I think 6'1". In the Air Force, they had a similar restriction because of if you're going to fly a jet, you couldn't be 6'10" or something like that. But they've restricted that, I think, now because there's not a limit on that anymore. But I could see that being a big, big challenge, and I think that might be a lot of controversies coming out of this.
So we also want to talk about some of our other local schools. Southeastern defeated Stephen F. Austin 24-23 in their matchup this week, and as you mentioned, a team that could be in the thick of it for an FCS playoff slot.
Yeah, they play Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word is a very good football team. They really put a lot of numbers on the Nicholls State just 2 weeks ago. So, but Southeastern is winning the conference right now. So this is a big ball game. If they win this ball game, it's a big hurdle. They could end up winning this conference, and even though they don't have a winning season yet, they could end up winning that conference and get themselves in the playoffs.
And we also have Nicholls, who defeated Northwestern State 20-0, but they take on another in-state school in McNeese coming into town this week. That should be an interesting matchup. Again, I love these FCS matchups between these Louisiana schools.
You heard me say this often. Nicholls State, the McNeese, the Southeastern, they need to be playing one another. It's great for these teams to be playing one another. It's better for the crowds. Even if they play a ULL and step up like that, things like that, I think that really, really adds a lot of attention to the programs. It helps ticket sales. It helps recruiting. The Northwesterns of the world. It's really, really good to see those teams stay in the same conference and maybe even expand that just a little bit more. Maybe they can get a Southern and a Grambling in that conference one day. I would like to see that. That way you have more Louisiana schools in it because Louisiana has 10 big colleges like that, and there's no reason why those 8 can't get together and play against one another.
All right, Coach, we'll go ahead and turn the page and take a look at some Saints football as they dropped their game last Thursday to Denver 33-10 in Sean Payton's homecoming. And it was an ugly football game. There's no other way to put it.
No, I really feel sorry for Coach Allen. What's going on? I don't know what's going on with their defensive front. I've never in the NFL seen holes that big. I mean, they show the replays of it, and they're gigantic holes. Jason, you and I could run through it. I don't know if you, but I could run through some of those big holes. I mean, they're gigantic. You just don't see that in the NFL, and it's been happening for the last 3 weeks. The defense can't get themselves off the field. And that used to be the strong point of the New Orleans Saints and their pride, and they had the play. I don't know if they don't have the defensive linemen, but the defensive linemen are being driven back. And when that happens, that cut off the linebackers' angles. They can't fit the hole that's supposed to fit into. When you get the secondary making most of the tackles, and I know they've had some injuries, but they got it, and they're going back to Rattler. In my opinion, Hayner was not given much of a chance. I really like him because I think he's got a quicker arm. The little bit he's got in the ball game, his arm is a lot quicker. He can move just as well as Rattler. And but I just think the fact that they jumped over him, I don't know if they gave him much of a chance. And for what I heard all through spring and then early fall camp, was Hayner was the guy. In fact, Rattler didn't even make the early roster, and he was the emergency guy. And but they jumped right over him. Didn't get much of a chance. Gave him a little snap. A couple of snaps in the Kansas City ball game. So I don't know. What's going on with that? But that's not the answer until their defense really can shut people down like they used to. And if they go to Los Angeles and again it looked like the same against a real good Charger team that's coming off a big loss as of last night. I don't know. I certainly hope and pray that they can get this thing turned around because I think somebody said the other day that the chances of them getting to the playoffs after a 2-5 start are very slim.
Yeah, Coach, to your point, I think I ran a six flat wind 8-40, so I don't think I'd be running through any of those holes. But do you think they're able to turn it around against the Chargers this week? And if not, at what point do you start looking at – you hate to say it, I know especially you, but at what point do you start to say, let's figure out what we need to do moving forward and possibly start looking at what pieces we're going to be collecting in the draft?
Yeah, I think they get some people back this week, and I hope that Carr can play. And I do think they get a couple people back. Taysom Hill might be back from what we understand the early report, but they need to replace. Beto I thought was an excellent corner. I know that the referees were looking at him and held him to a different standard, but I think that's good. I love number one. He makes a lot of plays. Avante Taylor, he makes a lot of plays. I love him on defense. He runs around. He makes plays behind the line of scrimmage. He makes plays in the line of scrimmage. And I think he's one of the better tacklers that they have. He's not really big, but I think Coach Allen alluded to that they have to tackle better, which I understand that. The offensive line is I know they're not great, but I like to see Kamara. Kamara is quick to the hole. But, you don't see him breaking tackles. He's not that kind of back. He's a back that needs to be in the perimeter. He needs to be in space a little bit. But he hits the hole hard. But you don't see him run through many tackles. He's not a big guy. So they don't. Maybe Williams is a little bit better at that. But they do have to mix it going with play-action passes. I think that's what they do with Rattler a lot. They make him run a lot of nakeds and boots, and they put him on the move and gives him a run-pass option. So I hope they get. By the way, I've said their defense, I think their special teams are very special. I think that special teams coach is one, if not the best in the league. He does a phenomenal job with special teams and kickoff coverage, not just the kicker and the punter I'm talking about. I'm talking about their teams, their coverage team, their punt team. You very, very seldom, knock on wood, see them break down.
All right, Coach, that'll do it for our first segment. When we come back from the break, we're going to have special guest Gordy Rush. So don't touch that dial. You're watching on Varsity Sports Now.
We would like to thank the Accardo Law Firm for being a supporter of the Let's Be Frank video podcast.
Based out of Gramercy, Louisiana, LSR produces Southern Cane pure cane sugar, which is only grown, refined, and packaged in Louisiana. LSR utilizes the latest innovations in technology, as well as ensuring the growth and stability of Louisiana's sugarcane farmers by integrating more than 800 growers in the industry's economic structure. Southern Cane is available in your local Associated Grocers and Rouse's supermarkets.
Since 1972, Riverlands Insurance Services has been dedicated to securing the best insurance products and services available to protect you, your family, your assets, and your business. Our goal has been to establish a strong relationship and partnership between you, the insurance company, and our agency, creating a circle of success that prepares for disasters before they actually happen.
All right, we want to welcome in our special guest who played under head coach Frank Monica while he was at Jesuit, played defensive back at LSU, and current sideline reporter for the LSU Tigers. I want to bring on Gordy Rush. Gordy, thank you so much for joining us. And when you look at this LSU team and what they've done this year, the defense has really blossomed under Coach Baker, especially over the past few games. What do you attribute most to that?
Well, I think he's got an excellent coaching staff. I think they've done an incredible job of in this new day and age of college football, the transfer portal, and especially a new staff with a lot of new faces, putting people in the right seats on the bus in the right position, teaching them the way you want to do things. And it's been incredible on every level, from the defensive ends and the job that Kevin Peoples has done with the pass rushes those guys have done. Bo Davis with a bunch of freshmen and transfers, they've been outstanding in the defensive backfield. Of course, Blake with the linebackers, and then in the backfield, Corey Raymond coming back to secondary has made tremendous strides considering what we went through last year.
Gordy, listen, thank you again for being here. First of all, before we get all started, you and I both, we had a mutual friend in Charlie Baglio. We just left his wake, and a sad time for football and the fans and his family, naturally. And the guy's 81 years old. He was a legend in the state, and worked with him side by side for many, many years. And I got to know him first when I recruited his school, and he was a coach. I remember vividly going in and talking two men with him, and he used that against Evangel in the state championship game. I remember very, very well. Just a good friend, and so our prayers are for him and his family, and also that Charlie and the place. Hopefully that we'll see him all again. But it was good to see you there today, and we both had to rush home and get this. But thank you for being here. Gordy, just switching over, when you as an athlete, and also not many people knew that you had signed actually with Purdue before you transferred to LSU. And but Gordy, I'm telling you, Gordy, everybody that's watching this program was a hitter. I don't know if I had a more physical football player than what you were. We had some guys that might have been bigger, maybe faster, but when it came to striking, Gordy, you could not play today. You'd be out of the game. They might put you in prison. You might be an Angola because you couldn't play today. I'm watching that game the other night on TV last night. Yeah. And two plays in a row. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I don't understand when a guy lowers his head like that. What is the defensive player supposed to do? He has no choice. He becomes defenseless.
I mean, really. I mean, they take the football out of you. The targeting call. Sage Ryan had a targeting call that got reversed, and it was the right call. But I mean, what else are you gonna do as a free safety? And they run a post right at you. I mean, it's either you get the ball. I was always taught it's head or ball, and now, God forbid, you can't lead with the head. And he did a nice job of turning the shoulder, but. It's a different game, Coach. It's a different game. And, my dad, you remember my dad, he was like Larry Zonko. He was a fullback that played at Tulane and got drafted by the Eagles. And heck, he had me spearing on the playground at 6 years old.
The helmet's a weapon.
I'm teaching my kids to tackle with a tire. I'm like, what is this? Yeah, grab the tire.
Exactly. I mean, I'm appalled by it. I don't know what they expect a defensive player to do in a crossing route when the crossing route's coming right at you. He's a 290-pound tight end. What am I supposed to do? Take his legs? That no player wants that. Anyway, Gordy, Jason brought this up. He alluded to the defense in terms of, everybody was raving about Perkins. I mean, in my mind, Perkins really had that one real game. He stood out, and everybody expected him to do the same every week. But all of a sudden, we got the emergence of this kid by the name of Weeks. And he's got a motor. I mean, for the last couple of weeks, he's really been impressive. What do you think of that kid?
Well, I think the world of Whit Weeks. I mean, he's tremendous, and I think give Blake Baker credit on trying to put all the pieces together. It's funny you mentioned Harold Perkins. He burst on the scene, and he was 6'1.5", 6'2", 205, and he had a good cast of characters with him 2 years ago. B.J. Ojulari, who's with the Cardinals, was on the other side, and nobody really knew what to make of him. And it's funny that you talk about that. We talk about football changing, and my middle school, my middle school seventh grader was playing middle school last night. The opposing team, they had 8 in the box, and everybody's shooting a gap, and they just go. And that's kind of what they're being taught. And that reminded me a little bit of Harold. In high school, he's the best athlete on the field. And then later in the season, we got to play Kendall Browse at Arkansas, and they decided to put multiple receivers out there and turn him into a defensive back, and you have to go into coverage. Or we got the Jimbo Fisher the next week, and they put a tight end and an H-back and ran at him because he was 205 pounds. So, I think both camps wanted to see if Perkins could play linebacker. He struggled last year with Matt House, and then Blake started him at the will and then eventually moved him to the Sam. And I thought he was getting more comfortable. But those linebacker instincts were, he hadn't played off the ball. And so he was struggling, I think, to learn that. He was getting better at it. But I can tell you that they miss him, no doubt, on third down, those third down packages. He's on the line of scrimmage. Everybody had to account for him. But Weeks is obviously one of the best linebackers in the SEC, might be All-American if he continues on this pace. Penn's played the middle linebacker, and Witt's been at the will. And what they've done is they've taken Major Burns, who was a big safety, and put him at where Perkins was at the star Sam position, and he plays well. He fills the gap, and he's able to cover a little bit. And so they've really gelled together defensively. And I think both Weeks has obviously been superior in that will position, and Burns has done a nice job filling in for Perkins.
Gordy, from my viewpoint, and I'm only watching on TV, but I really watch it closely on TV. And this is just my opinion only. Still don't think that they still have the caliber of great defensive players as they used to have, especially the defensive line. And maybe some of their speed on the outside also. And I really believe that. I do think they get a lot out of them, and I think that's why Baker's probably blitzed a little bit more, because when you're blitzing, you're covering up something. You know what I mean? And so I hope they can continue to do that. But again, they got a long way to go. All right, let me swap over to the offense real quick, Gordy. By the way, Perkins was a running back in high school, so I've been on that side with my projections. You recruit a kid and you project him, and that projection sometimes never works out. So you got to be careful with that when you recruit. And you can't say, well, this tight end is going to be a great defensive end or a great offensive lineman. You never really know that. But let's turn to the offensive line. Going in, Coach Kelly talked about how he's going to do a lot of gap down schemes. I saw you show with him yesterday, and talked about the week's play, and that was pretty cool. But now it looks like they're going back to a lot more zone. Do you suspect that, or is that
a lot of stretch zone? I think they were surprised, Coach, a little bit earlier. I think two things. I don't, with Nussmeier not being a dual threat quarterback, he certainly can move around the pocket. I think they were starting with USC. I think they were surprised that USC got after him as much and filled up the box and put some numbers up there. I think the combination of that, and then LSU just doesn't have a wide receiver like Thomas and Neighbors. It's a 4-3-4 guy that can take the top off the defense. It's going to beat you deep and stretch the field vertically. And so I sit there on the field, a defensive coordinator. I want to get after Nussmeier a little bit, and I'm not scared if I got to play bump or I got to play, man-free or something like that they're going to beat me like they did a year ago with the cast of characters that they have. And so I think we've seen this offense evolve a little bit, and I think they've done a nice job. They go deep into the count. Look, Nussmeier can make every throw on the field. He sees the field well. They've run a lot of stretch zone. They found Durham that does a great job as a true freshman of really being patient, reading it. I love the way that he hits the hole. And they do a good job of trying to force your hand, see what you're playing, a lot of pre-snap movement. Nussmeier can see it, and they're taking what the defense gives them. And so it's been an interesting watch. But obviously you got Nussmeier, you got four, I think, solid receiving options. The Taylor is a phenomenal tight end that's going to play obviously on Sundays. And so they're a matchup problem for a lot of teams in a day and age when a lot of people are playing redshirt freshman quarterbacks. You don't get too many guys like Nussmeier that has that sort of moxie to him, that sees the field and has that sort of arm strength.
I agree with that. He was in a manning camp the last 2 years, and a great kid. Great kid. And I love the fact that he has no fear. He doesn't mind putting the ball in the window. When that happens, you're going to come up with a pick every now and then when you try to put that ball in the window, but he's also going to make some great throws. The overtime period, the first play, he goes deep. I don't know if that was a check with me situation. He saw the 1-on-1 on the outside, but he's not afraid to go vertical. And I think that's what Kelly likes about him too. He's got a little bit of that gunslinger, mentality a little bit. I really like to see him. every now and then pull the ball on the zone, go 5 yards and slide, something like that, just to keep that defense honest just a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you're going to run that stretch and you're going to run some of that zone read action, I think the opportunity to keep it's there once or twice. They actually did in the fourth quarter on that 8-minute drive, and I even said on the radio, I'm like, why there? Why don't use it there? We're trying to run the clock. But I think you saved that for a couple spots just to keep people honest, no question.
I know Coach Kelly mentioned something today because they were talking about his percentage of completions, and he was talking about he doesn't throw many short slants and hitch routes and stuff like that. They're more of a vertical team, deep diagonal routes and stuff that nature, which you need a good pocket. In my mind, a good offense, it doesn't matter how you get down the field. Everybody complains, well, let's see more running game. If I got a clean pocket like he's had against Ole Miss, he had a clean pocket most of the night. Why not throw the ball? Because it gives you a little bit more time to get the receivers shaking loose down the field. If it's man coverage, give them time to get off the man. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But they've been fun to watch. I know, but they go in the teeth of the season now, Gordy. What do you think's in store against A&M?
Well, I think, I was over there for a week. My kids are at the Junior Olympics there at the end of summer, so I got to spend a day over there with Coach Moffitt and see what they're building. And, nothing but respect for Mike Elko. I mean, when's the last time we've seen Duke out physical people? He did a great job at Duke. He was a solid defensive coordinator at Notre Dame and A&M. They're really good up front, especially their defensive front seven. They have 17 sacks on the season. And they've played half the year with Connor Wegman as their quarterback. He got knocked out. They had to go to a redshirt freshman for a while, but they found a way to win football games. I think last time out they beat Mississippi State 34-24. Wegman, a little shaky at times. He had 2 picks. He didn't deal with pressure particularly well. We know LSU's going to bring a lot of packages. And, Blake Baker's going to try to take away the run and get after Wegman a little bit. And on the flip side, it's good on good. Can LSU's offensive line handle and protect this front seven for Texas A&M that's been fantastic so far?
Being an offensive coach most of my life, Gordy, when you go against a team that blitzes a lot and have people come from all over, it's hard to prepare for that in 3 days. That's really what your practice week is going to be. It's 3-day period. You go Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it'll walk through on Thursday, and then you fly out on Friday. So that's really hard to actually cover all those gaps. Now you had an open week and you go against a blitzing team, it's a little bit different, but it looks like that where there could be advantage there somewhere. But playing in Kyle Field, it's a massive field, and that 12th man really does make a difference there. So, and I noticed that the spread, one spread I saw LSU was favored, the other spread I saw Texas A&M favored. So I don't know if the odds makers have this correct or not.
Look, I'm this day and age, Coach. I don't know if you agree with this. I opened all my talks with this. I said, look, Alabama last year won the SEC. In 2019, that same team, in my opinion, would have finished 7th in the SEC. They'd been a 28-point underdog to Burrow and company, 28-point underdog to Tua and company. And I just think you don't have the great teams anymore because you have so much more parity and nobody is as deep. Alabama's not 3 deep on the defensive line like they were under Nick Saban. And so, in my opinion, I think every game, every time you go on the road, it's that much tougher because you've got so many new faces out there, and anything can happen on any given Saturday. And that's what we've seen in this league. And to me, this is the toughest game on LSU's regular season that's left because it is at Kyle Field, the physicality that they bring. After that, LSU gets 3 or 4 at home, and Alabama's obviously, I think adapting to the transition they've had, and they've had some struggles of recent. And that being said, going to Kyle Field is going to be tough. They're going to be physical.
Yeah, I agree. Gordy, the first game of the year, I thought that both these two teams, Clemson and Georgia, playing one another. Yeah, I said, boy, there were some athletes on that field. I would not be surprised to see them in a matchup again in the playoffs. Gordy, I'm switching over to what is your position? What do you feel about the prediction of what's going to happen with this NIL stuff, transfer portal stuff? Is there anything that you hear down the pipe that might impact this in the future, or this is what we're going to be and seeing in the future?
Well, I don't think it goes away. I think the question is, are you regulated? I mean, and Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn coach, is obviously up in Congress now, and Coach Saban and Coach Kelly have all been up there, and they were trying to get something through. Let's see what happens with the election. And then hopefully it starts at that level where they put some sort of cap in place. Because, it's like, imagine the NFL and you didn't have a salary cap. So it's not fair. And then it only gets complicated now with these SEC schools and the profit sharing. Was it like 21, 22 million come the next summer, in which is going to be distributed to the student athletes, with the lion's share of it going to football. And, it's a mess. I think that they need to put some sort of consistency and regulate it. And I think it's really changed the coaching, the coaching thing. Coach, I know you at St. Charles Catholic, you built a heck of a program. You had kids, and I talked to Coach Stein the other night, I was down there, that ran the same system when you got them in 8th grade all the way up. And the kids in the programs at the youth level, you went out there and they were running the same offense. And now the big word's continuity. And I can't get 40 new players every year. I can't do that every year. The key is continuity. And how do I use that NIL money and that profit share to invest in my current roster and the recruits, with the idea that maybe I'll go fill a gap here or there. But you look at what Florida State did last year. They went out and paid and got a great team in there. They all left. And now Florida State's having a tough go of it. Ole Miss did great in the transfer portal. They put a lot of money out there. They have 2 losses. I know there's a lot of football there. But what happens next year when a lot of those guys move on? You can't keep doing that and get continuity. And so I say it's like an 8th grade English teacher. You imagine her getting a classroom with half the kids that didn't go to 7th grade at her school. I don't know what they can read or write. I don't know what their comprehension level is. I don't know what they can do. And the best example I could tell you, I went out to the first day of fall camp. Corey Raymond and they were going over cover 2 basics. I mean, we're talking about jamming and sinking on a 45, safeties passing off, the basic receivers, stuff that I haven't seen at the SEC level. But you, as a coach, you got to go back to basics and teach that. So, it's crazy times. It's about, to me, continuity. And at some point, they got to regulate this NIL.
Coach Jenkins was on our show last week, Gordy, and he mentioned that LSU during the summer, during the transfer portal, went after 2 big linemen. They lost one to Oklahoma and one to Miami. And basically, it was all about the money. It was all about that and stuff like that. And he mentioned, but it said it's come to that. You're right. It's got to come to somebody's got to put some structure in place, or else we don't have college football as we know it. It's not college. The degree doesn't mean anything anymore. They don't need a degree. All they need is a calculator. Something like that. So
I want to add, kind of my kid's interested in West Point, my oldest one, and I don't think there's any surprise. Army and Navy are both undefeated this year. And nobody's got, there's no NIL. They have continuity in their program. And especially at that level, the opponents they do, and they're getting picked. They're getting picked by the bigger schools and taken off. And I think it's a testimony to doing it that way, right? And having some continuity in your program.
Or even though it was at Tulane, we were pretty good when we had 4- and 5-year players.
Yes. Yeah.
Those guys that have been there a while, the redshirt guys, we were pretty good. You have older guys, 21, 20. They knew where all the bones were buried. You know what I mean? And that makes a big, big difference. They don't panic in that situation. Unfortunately, as you said, the need-based schools are feeling this brunt also because people going there and stealing some of these academic kids and bringing them in and giving them big money also. So right. I mean, I don't know where this is going. Gordy, just a final thought. That's it. What about this LSU football team would keep you up at night right now?
Oh, goodness gracious. I think for me, the 2 sides, I think, the inability to run and to get one-dimensional when you get into some of these big games, right? Especially this Saturday, I think you have to run enough to keep them balanced and keep them honest. They've done that the last 2 weeks against Ole Miss and Texas A&M. And for me, with the style of defense that they're playing, a defensive back, especially these safety plays, safeties have to be sure tacklers. You go back to the USC game, the South Carolina game last year. I've never seen so many blown assignments, missed tackles. Not everybody on the same page. Since they put Sage Ryan on the field with Gilbert, the A&M transfer, those 2 are veterans and they've been on the same page, not giving up big plays, right? It's hard enough right now in college football. I think, again, as you're gelling a little bit later into the season, You don't want to give up anything cheap. And they've done a good job of that the last 3 games, minus the one fourth down play against Ole Miss, which was kind of a freak play. They haven't given up anything cheap.
Yeah, Gordy, you listened well. You learned well. I said every week on this show, three things that will prevent from winning. Yeah. 1 is turnovers, 2 explosive plays, and 3 are missed tackles. In every situation, those 3 things will prevent you from winning football games. So you listened well. Just hit on that.
I had good coaches.
Coach Keller. But Gordy, listen, thank you so much for being with us. I know it's a tight schedule, that we're both on a tight schedule today. Thank you so much for taking your time. You do a great job of analyzing because you played the game and you know it. You know the game. You can be a secondary coach in a heartbeat. And Coach Raymond, something happens to him, tell Coach you can fill in, especially at $100 million a year. I think you can fill in right there, and I'll be your assistant. How's that?
Yeah, but on the flip side, I don't want kids coming on my door asking me, "Hey, I need some more money." More money.
Okay, Dad. All right, thank you so much, Gordy, and God bless you, and hug all the kids for me, please. Will you do that? And,
sounds good. Thanks.
We'll be in touch. Look, whenever you come through La Plaza, I'll treat you some dead chicken, okay?
Always. Sounds good. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Gordy.
We would like to thank Gulf Coast Sponsors for being a sponsor of the Let's Be Frank video podcast.
Based out of Gramercy, Louisiana, LSR produces Southern Cane pure cane sugar, which is only grown, refined, and packaged in Louisiana. LSR utilizes the latest innovations in technology, as well as ensuring the growth and stability of Louisiana's sugarcane farmers by integrating more than 800 growers in the industry's economic structure. Southern Cane is available in your local Associated Grocers and Rouse's supermarkets.
Since 1972, Riverlands Insurance Services has been dedicated to securing the best insurance products and services available to protect you, your family, your assets, and your business. Our goal has been to establish a strong relationship and partnership between you, the insurance company, and our agency, creating a circle of success that prepares for disasters before they actually happen.
We would like to thank Riverlands Insurance for sponsoring the Let's Be Frank video podcast.
Welcome back to segment 3 on the Let's Be Frank video podcast. I'm your host, Jason Duhe. Alongside me is Hall of Fame head coach Frank Monica. On tonight's segment of Let's Be Frank, Coach is going to break down faking injuries.
Well, basically, it's not really faking injuries. What I'm kind of enlighten people about a little bit is the so-called thing that's going around where these players are cramping or pretending to cramp up, and they're laying on the field to create some time to give his team rest and sometimes to prevent the momentum. I saw Ole Miss play Tulane last year, and Ole Miss used this extensively. I saw a high school game earlier this year, first game of the year, where the team was playing two-way players, and it was used extensively to give their guys a rest, to give them a blow so they could go on the sideline. So something must be done about this. But, under the rules, there's nothing you can do. It doesn't cost you a timeout, doesn't cost you anything. Because if a guy falls on the ground, because of the sensitivity of everybody with being hurt, you just can't say, well, let's keep the clock running. So what happens, you have to wait till he gets off the field, the guy lays down there, and sometimes it's legit. But okay, what can we do about this? Or the other part of it, you saw the Oregon ball game. Now, everybody's giving kudos and said the coach was a genius by doing what he did against Ohio State with the 10 seconds left about putting the 12th guy on the field. I don't know if that was legitimate or not. It didn't seem like it was, but they claimed by putting him on the field, clock ran down. They only gave Ohio State one last play in the ball game, and they took the penalty. But the clock would not awarded the seconds back on the clock. They took the penalty. So now these coaches, some of these coaches are geniuses. I understand that. Do they really sit around and think about a way that they can skirt the rule? My thing is, how are you going to correct this? Okay, how are you going to correct a guy from saying, well, I'm cramping, and he's really legitimately cramping? I think the only thing that you can do is that, one, okay, if it's the same player, that has to be some type of repercussion to him. Say if the same player say, wait a minute, he cannot come in for a certain amount of plays. Or you could say, okay, if you cramp up, you cannot come into the ball game this series or at least 2 or 3 plays. I think you're going to see a lot of that change now, because if a guy technically, I'm very familiar with cramping. We went to camp all the time. I'm very familiar. If a guy cramps on the field and you can't get the so-called cramp or Charlie horse, as people used to call it, you can't get that out of their leg, and he comes back on the field the very next play, there's something wrong with that, because he's going to cramp up again. So that guy probably needs to be taken in, put underneath the tent, give him an IV, and that'll snap him back in a short period of time. He'll be right at what they do in some cases. But there needs to be some type of regulation on this. Whether it's okay, if you cramp up, you're out of the game for at least 2 plays, or maybe it's 3 plays. And then I think you're going to see a lot of people, you're going to see a lot of teams not using this a lot, because I mean it's getting to me. The other day it was a joke of one particular player they showed on TV, an Alabama player. He came to the sideline. He's coming to the sideline. The coach made him sit down. So it would call timeout, give us some rest. Sometimes these coaches want to do that. Maybe they give them time to dissect the play, or sometimes they'll get a chance to get the right personnel in the ball game. So it's been used. It's been used an awful lot. And I think personally that the rules committee, need to come up with something to say, wait a minute now, this is getting out of hand when people are faking. And it's not an injury, so to speak. I know as a coach, I had a rule with my own team. If you're hurt, you stay laying on the ground. If you lay on the ground, if you're hurt, you stay on the ground for more than 5 seconds. If you're not hurt, you better be off the ground in 5 seconds and back in the huddle, because that way I know whether to run those doctors out there. And I know some people do that automatically. They do that just to kill a little time, and they put a guy that they've got a designated guy that's a cramper. Say, okay, you're cramping this situation, so I get some time to get my teams, especially in between transition for offense, defense, or special team. And it's happening. But there's got to be some type of regulation towards that, and there's not enough of it because they've kind of bending the rules there just a little bit.
Coach, in the same vein of bending the rules a bit, it's not quite on the injury train, but when you look back at what Dan Lanning did a few weeks ago against Ohio State, for those who don't know, he put 12 men on the field. That way there would be you have an extra defender on the field, time would run off the clock, and it basically forced the clock to expire because Ohio State, the quarterback wasn't really prepared for that situation. What are your thoughts on coaches planning for those specific situations in terms of maybe not skirting the rules, but being very aware and preparing for them in those situations?
Well, sometimes again, I don't know if that was intentional, but it looked like it was not, but it could have been. And I mean, and now they're declaring them genius. So there's some integrity you want with coaches naturally. That's one of the first things they tell you when they put in rules, stuff like that. But yet on the flip side, I know coaches will scour that book. In high school, for instance, I didn't even know this at one time. We were playing the ball game, and we had the ball. And we wanted to kill the clock, and we didn't want to give them the ball back. It was a tight ball game. And one of my left guard jumped off sides. And after he jumped off sides, I actually ran some time off, and the clock kept running after the penalty. So it wasn't by design after that, because that was a high school rule. It's what's called federation rules. Then the next play, another one of my guys jumped offside. I'm killing the clock, and it had nothing to do with it. I said, you know what? That's a dumb rule. I said, because I got an advantage here by jumping offside. I didn't teach my kids that. I'm not that smart. But I think that some of these things sometimes coaches do. They will scour that playbook that rule book and say, hey, wait a minute, guys, maybe we can take advantage of this. Let's look at it. Other people just try to say, hey, look, I know what the rules are. You'd be surprised though, because the rule changes each year. It's really hard sometimes to keep up with all the rule changes. And sometimes you got a coach on your staff that you designate. All right, coach, you're responsible for any rule changes. You got to keep us abreast and keep me clean.
All right, Coach, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Blitz the Ball Coach segment, where tonight you're going to talk about offensive blocking schemes.
Well, guys, this is something you hear a lot about. You hear that. Well, you hear commentators talk about, well, this is the zone play. exactly what's a zone play, exactly what's a gap down scheme. Some teams use both. Both teams just use one. A lot of teams that you watch the NFL teams, they'll use both. They have more time to practice than because the colleges are really limited in what they can do, and so they have maybe a time frame of 3 practice days. In the NFL, they have no restrictions on when they can practice or how long they can practice in terms of that. They do have some. But anyway, what I have here, I have a copy of what the top screen here is what I call a zone play. If you notice, a zone means all the linemen will step in one direction, and who's ever in their zone, whoever's in zone, they will block that zone. And now you get a chance to push on the guy, and it looks like kind of like a double team. You can see the one at the top right here. You can see that looks kind of like a double team. But what he is, they're working on the down lineman, and he works up to the linebacker. These guys have to work on this tempo. It's not easy. This is really a difficult scheme. It looks simple on the board, but you got 2 guys working to the next level. What you say, the next level, they block the one level. Some people just lock on the lineman and say, let the linebacker flow over the top, or let him just and let him fit on the run, and he might pick the wrong hole. But a good football team will work up and make sure everybody's blocked. If you notice on the backside over here, I have the defensive end. He's unblocked. And this guy right here, he belongs to the quarterback. So in other words, if this guy ends up making the play on that running back right there, you tell the quarterback you misread it. And that's what we talked about. We'll talk about with Garrett Nussmeier. Sometimes he needs to just pull that ball. If that end starts to squeeze, or outside linebacker, whatever you call him, if he starts to squeeze on the running back, and if he takes a step, you think you can beat him, and the outside receivers will block. Now, in with this zone play comes what they call the RPOs. So you can fake this very zone, and these guys will run combination routes on the outside. They can run hitches, they can run slants, they can run takeoffs, they can run various things off this. So this is what this is the inside zone play. The running back's aiming point is the outside cheek of the right guard in this particular case. And so this is a zone. On the bottom of this screen is what we call a gap down screen. Before we go to that, though, I want to tell you about on top right here, that's the inside zone. You can also run the outside zone, which is a little bit wider play to the outside. And outside zone, people call it the stretch, which means that these guys will run. The only difference is on the stretch play, the angle for the block are a lot wider. So you angle here, now you're trying to go for the outside, rip your inside arm to the outside number of this guy. You're trying to go a lot wider, and the back has to read that. Now, in order for the defense to be proficient at stopping this, they have to stretch at the same level as the lineman's block, or they have to bench press the guy and make the back run a hump and penetrate. So if they basically have to bench press this guy. So zone schemes are used an awful lot. Some teams, LSU, for instance, when they had Jalen Daniels, the only run scheme they had was the zone scheme. They ran one play. It was the zone, and Jalen Daniels would pull it. That's the only play they had, was the zone read off of that, and all the RPOs and stuff like that. Now, at the bottom of the screen is what they call a gap down scheme. This is a little bit more elaborate. Now, what you have to understand before getting further, defenses are not dumb. They're going to move defenses every snap. What I have here is a down line. You see a 4-man line at the top, and this right here, you see an odd front right here. So people call it 3-4. This could be a 4-2. This could be a 4-3. But you got 4 down linemen. So right here is a gap down scheme. Notice in this particular case, gap down means I block the man inside. I block the man on, man inside of me, and I go to the backside linebacker. So your rule is simple. Block man on, man inside of me, backside linebacker. Here's you see a double team right here with the tackle. There's a double team right there. And then the fullback here would kick out. This guard, a lot of people call this particular play the power O. This guard is actually pulling around this, and he's going to wrap into that hole on that linebacker right there. That's called the power O. O stands for the off guard pulling. That's what that stands for. So this is a very common play. Now, there's other plays too where you can pull both the linemen. People call that a jab OT. They call it the counter tray, where both linemen will pull. You pull to the tight end side or whatever side you want to run it. Other cases, you can actually pull weak. So you can pull these 2 guys on this side, and they go to the weak side. I'm trying to go backwards here, but you can pull these 2 guys here and go to the weak side with the play if you want to. So you got gap down schemes, meaning you block down and you kick out. The fullback here is to kick out that linebacker. But you don't see many true fullbacks anymore in college. Everybody's in spread. The only place you see fullbacks nowadays are in the NFL. So it's amazing how very few people use those particular guys. But again, I'm talking about zone scheme. I'm talking about a gap down scheme. I'm talking about stretch scheme. I did not talk about what they call a trap. A trap scheme is definitely more that's normally used in the interior of the line, where you pull a guard and he would trap a lineman, and somebody will influence him. Like, for instance, this guard right here, he might pull and influence him to the outside and let that guy come up the field, and you trap him. It's really good against penetrating defenses, people that like to be up the field. So you can trap them, sometimes get a big play. But traps have a lot of variables to it, and you don't see as many as they used to have at one time. And last particular scheme is what they call a base. A base scheme means exactly that. It means you block the man in front. One time we were playing a playoff game at halftime. We had to change the blocking scheme that wasn't working. So I said, guys, we're going to base this. Well, I'm walking out to the field, and one of my senior linemen said, he walked up to him and said, Coach, what does base mean? You know what? I got so mad. I said, you know what? I'm not even going to address that. I said, that's my fault for not teaching that kid what base means. Base means you block the man in front. You just block the man in front. So, and now we tell them that all the time. If you don't know who to block, at least block the man in front of you, and so nobody goes as a free hitter. But basically, that's what it is, guys. This is what they call the offensive blocking schemes. There are a ton of them. You can draw a bunch of them up. But there's a difference between a zone scheme. Zone means exactly that. You're blocking the man in your zone. Gap means exactly that. You're blocking down. But whenever you block down, you got to compensate for that block down by pulling somebody from the other side to kick out the front side.
All right, Coach, thank you. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our final segment is the At the Water Cooler segment, where, Coach, you were going to talk about the most important position in all of sports.
There's a little kind of argument I heard a couple guys talking about. Said, well, what's the most important position in all of sports? They said, is it a point guard in basketball? Because I saw where, for instance, where the Pelicans just signed a guy to a 4-year deal, $112 million for 4 years. I said, or is it the midfielder in soccer that's making millions? Is it the baseball home run hitter that hits 50 or so home runs, like a tiny guy? Is it a pitcher that can win 20 games for you? But what's the most important position in all of sports? In my opinion, is the quarterback. I think the quarterback is the one position in all of sports that you really need to win. I don't know if you can win without a good quarterback. Now, there are some that are just pretty good, and some that are excellent at it. We got what's some of the qualities that make some of these guys? Well, one, we all know he has to have a good arm. Well, believe me, most of them do have good arms. I mean, I work the Manning camp every year. There are 45 quarterbacks every year, and I give of the 45, they all can throw it. They all can throw it. They can spin it pretty good. Okay, the other intangibles might be, okay, what kind of feet does he have? How tall is he? What kind of leader is this particular guy? Is it, does he have a quick release? In my opinion, I told you about Hainer. I really like Hainer because I think he's got a quick arm. I think he's got a quick release, and I think you don't have to be a fast guy, but you got to be able to move in the pocket a little bit. You have to be able to keep your eyes up the field. I had a chance to be in the meetings a lot with Drew Brees, and my good friend Greg McMahon was with the Saints. He would get in when Coach Payton was there, and I could sit in the meetings a couple of times, and I go in the summer a couple of times, and I saw how intense Drew Brees was when Coach Carmichael put the play up on the board, and then Coach Lombardi would talk about the reads, and then so Drew would go through then it would show game tape. It would show footage of the particular play, and Drew was hard on himself. He said, "That's not a good read. This was a good read." He was really, really intense. His preparation was unbelievable. Peyton Manning was like that. I mean, you can tell they were prepared. They were intense. More importantly, these guys were great leaders, and they had, number one, the key word, they had respect. When Drew Brees, when the practice was over with, he kept some of the receivers out there on their own. The rest of the team was dismissed. He was out there alone. They were throwing some fade routes, throwing some slants, throwing some routes. He kept them there, and nobody outworked him. And I remember Coach McMahon telling me one morning he got to the office at 4:30 in the morning. He heard weights clanging in the weight room. He walked in. That was Drew Brees working out with the weights, 4:30 in the morning. I mean, you have to have that relentless. That's what makes people respect you. So that's what made that guy what he is. He was not the tallest quarterback. He's a 6-foot quarterback. He was not the fastest quarterback, but nobody outworked him, and his preparation was unbelievable. His mental toughness was there. Didn't miss many ball games, as we all know. He had all those intents, but the most important thing he had, he had respect, and he prepared so well. And he'd go way out of his way to prepare. He was a good athlete in his own terms. In terms of that, wasn't a fast athlete, but he had good hand and eye coordination, and he was very accurate. But I would say this: he didn't have the strongest arm. He did not have the strong. Peyton Manning, I saw him throw live. He did not have the strongest arm. Eli had a real strong arm, but Peyton's ball got there. But he was the same guy that Drew Brees was as far as preparation. So when it comes to what position in all the sports that commands, in my mind, that commands probably the most important, I would say the quarterback on all levels.
Thank you, Coach. And we want to go ahead and look at our last segment before we get out of here, which is going to be the lock of the week. Coach, who do you like in this week's matchups?
Well, I'm going back with Colorado. They were good to me last week. I'm going back with Colorado against Cincinnati. I'm leading Cincinnati the points. Got to think Colorado's getting better.
I'm going to go with a little bit of a dangerous pick. I'm going to take Vandy. Vandy it's 18.5 points at home, which we both know doesn't mean a ton. They are playing Texas, so that's the dangerous part. Both teams are 5-1 against the spread this season. A little bit of a risky pick, but Vanderbilt, despite playing an away game at home, has been, has really put up their biggest games against their biggest opponents.
Put your mortgage, Jason, on Colorado. Okay.
I might be better off doing that, Coach, but we had to pick a different team, so I had to make sure I put some of my money on somewhere else or somebody else's money. So let's go ahead and take a look at our social medias before we get out of here. Follow us on Facebook at the Let's Be Frank Video Podcast, on X, Instagram, and TikTok at the LBF Podcast. Coach, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, guys, listen, thank you. Please go to your church and the service on Sunday. Pray for our country. Pray for peace in our country. Pray for our families. And our guest speaker next week is Jay Roth, a former Hall of Famer, head coach at Rummel at one time. He's now the AD there. He will be our guest speaker next week, Coach Jay Roth.
All right, so that'll do it here for us. So from everybody, and head coach Frank Monica, I am Jason Duhe. And remember, laissez le bon temps rouler, let the good times roll.